At Christmas, my children turned their backs on me, so I went to the bank and made a decision. I came home with a stuffed envelope and an idea no one expected. That night, the doorbell rang, but the guests weren't family. What happened next made the news and left my children in shock. The alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning as usual, but Henry Thompson remained motionless in bed for long minutes. The calendar on the wall showed December 24th, and the silence of the house suffocated him like never before. It had been exactly 3 years since Eleanor, his companion of nearly 5 decades, had passed away after a long battle with a disease that consumed not only her body, but also the joy that once emanated through every room of that house. Henry got up with difficulty. His 78 years weighed more heavily on holidays. The radio that Eleanor always turned on in the morning remained silent. The smell of fresh coffee that once permeated the kitchen had been replaced by the odor of mildew and loneliness. No voice echoed through the corridors, only the tick-tock of the wall clock, a silent witness to the passage of time, broke the oppressive silence. "Good morning, Ellie," he murmured to the portrait on the bedside table, a ritual he religiously maintained, as if somehow he could keep his wife's presence alive. He walked to the kitchen and prepared a cup of instant coffee. He sat at the empty table and contemplated the chairs that would remain unoccupied that night. Paul, his oldest son, had communicated by phone that he would spend Christmas with his wife's family in Miami. Mary, his middle child, had been living in England for almost a decade and rarely returned to the United States. And Robert, the youngest, was organizing a Christmas event for an important company and could not attend. Unavoidable commitments, they all justified, and Henry accepted it, as he always did. He didn't want to be a burden to his children, although he felt that, little by little, he was becoming just a seasonal obligation, a courtesy visit when the calendar indicated a special date. Still, he decided to prepare Christmas dinner like in the old days. He went to the market and bought a ham, stuffing, fruits for dessert, and a bottle of wine. The lady at the checkout, seeing him with so many groceries, asked cheerfully, "Having family over for Christmas, Mr. Thompson?" He hesitated for a moment, but nodded with a forced smile. It was easier to lie than to admit the truth that consumed him inside. Back at home, he decorated the living room with the old nativity scene that Eleanor used to set up every year. He placed the small artificial Christmas tree in the living room and hung the ornaments one by one, each colored ball bringing with it a memory of the times when the family gathered to celebrate. He remembered the children's laughter, Eleanor's loving gaze, the heated but always respectful discussions about politics and football that animated the evenings. By dusk, the table was set for 5 people, as if everyone would appear at any moment. Embroidered tablecloth, special china, crystal glasses he had received as wedding gifts. Henry wore his best shirt, put on cologne, and sat at the head of the table, waiting for guests he knew would not come. The clock struck 8, then 9. At 10, Henry served himself some wine and raised his glass in a solitary toast. "Merry Christmas, Ellie," he whispered to the empty air in the dining room. A stubborn tear rolled down his wrinkled face. It was then that the thought emerged, clear and frightening. There was no more meaning in staying there. The house, once full of life and happy memories, now seemed like a mausoleum that only preserved pain and absence. Perhaps it was time to sell the property and move to a retirement home, as Paul had suggested a few months ago. "It's for your own good, Dad. There you'll have company, medical care, and won't have to worry about anything." At the time, he had vehemently rejected the idea. Now, however, as he looked at the empty chairs around him, the proposal no longer seemed so absurd. The next day, he decided to start organizing his documents. He needed to have everything in order before communicating his decision to his children. He went to his office and opened the old solid wood desk where he kept important papers. While looking for the house deed, he found at the bottom of a drawer a shoebox he hadn't seen in a long time. Curious, he opened it and felt his heart tighten. Inside were old photographs, young Henry and Eleanor at the beach, Paul's birth, Mary's first day of school, Robert learning to ride a bicycle, birthdays, graduations, his children's weddings, an entire life recorded on photographic paper yellowed by time. Among the photos, he found a sealed envelope with his name written in Eleanor's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, he opened it and removed a letter dated 3 weeks before his wife's passing. "My dear Henry," the letter began, If you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer physically by your side. Knowing you as I do, I know you'll isolate yourself, close yourself off to the world, and cultivate only the pain of my absence. Don't do that, my love. 50 years together taught me that you have a heart too big to live in solitude. Henry had to interrupt his reading several times as tears blurred his vision. Eleanor continued, "If one day life seems meaningless to you, remember what you always told me when I was sad, that the best way to heal your own pain is to take care of someone who needs it more than we do. Find that someone, Henry. Rebuild your life, not in a retirement home, as I know Paul will suggest, but among people who can give and receive true affection." The last words of the letter hit Henry like a ray of light in the darkness. "You have always been my fortress, my safe harbor. Now, be that for others who, like you now, feel lost and alone. Promise me you'll try. For you, for me, for us. With all my love eternally, Eleanor." Henry closed his eyes and pressed the letter against his chest. At that moment, something awakened inside him, a whisper of hope, a spark of purpose. Instead of sinking even deeper into the emptiness that consumed him, he decided to listen to Eleanor's last request. That same afternoon, Henry left home with part of the savings he kept for emergencies. He didn't have a specific plan, just the certainty that he needed to follow Eleanor's advice. He walked aimlessly through the streets of Santa Monica in Los Angeles, observing people hurrying past with bags of gifts and the Christmas decorations that adorned the shops. The sun was beginning to set when he spotted, on the sidewalk near the main square, a boy of approximately 8 years old, selling water bottles. Beside him, sitting on a small improvised stool, was a young woman, visibly pregnant and with an expression of fatigue. Even from a distance, Henry could perceive the effort they made to maintain dignity amid difficulties. The scene touched his heart deeply. He recognized in that family a reflection of his own story, the struggle for dignity, hope that survives amid scarcity. When young, he himself had sold fruits at the market with his father to help support his younger siblings. He knew what it was like to work under the scorching sun, with an empty stomach and a forced smile on his face. He approached slowly so as not to frighten them. "Good afternoon," he greeted kindly. "How much is the water?" $3, sir," replied the boy with a timid voice but determined look. "I'll take them all," said Henry, pointing to the 12 bottles that remained in the cooler. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. The mother, suspicious, stood up with difficulty. "All of them? Are you sure, sir?" she asked with a slight southern accent. "Absolutely," confirmed Henry, handing her a $100 bill. "Keep the change." The woman hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "That's a lot of money, sir. I can't accept it." "May I ask your name?" Henry questioned. "Josephine, and this is my son, Luke. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Henry, and I insist that you accept it. Consider it an early Christmas present." Josephine still tried to return part of the money, but Henry was firm. While Luke stored the bottles in his worn backpack, Henry observed the woman's effort to remain standing. "Are you all right? You look tired." "I'm in my 8th month," she explained, caressing her belly. "But I can't stop working. Luke and I live in a rented place, and his father, well, he's no longer with us." Henry nodded, understanding. "Where do you live?" "In the Hope Hills community. It's far, but the rent is what we can afford." An idea began to form in Henry's mind. Without hesitation, he offered to help them carry their things and accompany them home. Josephine, reluctant at first, ended up accepting the respectful approach of that white-haired gentleman with a kind look. During the way, Luke began to open up. He told how he was in 3rd grade, loved math, and dreamed of being an engineer when he grew up. Henry listened attentively, asking questions and being surprised by the boy's intelligence and maturity. When they arrived at the small 2-room house, Henry felt a tightness in his chest. The place was clean and organized, but almost everything was missing. A mattress on the floor, some pans, clothes folded in cardboard boxes. There was no refrigerator, just a larger cooler where they kept the few foods. "Have you had dinner yet?" he asked. "We'll eat something when Luke finishes his homework," answered Josephine, avoiding his gaze. Henry immediately understood that there probably would be no dinner that night. "May I bring something for you? I bought too much food for Christmas dinner, and there will be a lot left over." Josephine politely refused, but Luke couldn't hide the gleam of hope in his eyes. Henry didn't insist at that moment, but promised himself he would return. He said goodbye and took the path back home, feeling something he hadn't experienced in a long time: a purpose. The next day, he returned with grocery bags: fruits, vegetables, meats, milk, school supplies for Luke, and some baby clothes. Josephine tried to refuse, but Henry was gentle and firm. "I'm not doing charity, Josephine. I'm sharing what I have with those I now consider my friends." The visits became frequent. 3 times a week, Henry would appear with food and always found time to listen to Luke's stories, who, little by little, began to call him Grandpa. The boy showed his school notebooks, and Henry helped him with his lessons, remembering the times when he did the same with his own children. It was during one of these visits that Henry noticed, while passing through Maple Street, a house with an abandoned appearance. The garden was unkempt, the windows dirty, but a faint light shone through the faded curtains. On the porch, an elderly lady looked at the movement of the street with eyes tired from waiting. Something in that image moved him. Driven by a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time, Henry approached the rusty gate. "Good afternoon," he greeted. "Pardon my intrusion, but do you need anything? I noticed you're here alone." The woman, with completely white hair and a face marked by time, looked at him with a mixture of wariness and surprise. She must have been around 80 years old, perhaps more. "Who are you, sir?" she asked with a trembling voice. "Henry Thompson. I live a few blocks from here." After a few moments of hesitation, she invited him in. "I'm Dorothy Allen," she introduced herself. "I don't receive many visitors these days." The interior of the house was like a museum from another time. Antique furniture, black and white photographs, a tube radio, everything clean, but with that layer of sadness that only places empty of human presence possess. During the conversation, Henry discovered that Dorothy had been living alone since her brother's death 5 years ago. She had no children and survived on a minimum retirement. She rarely went out as she suffered from arthritis and was afraid of falling in the street. "I used to have a cat," she told him, "but he also passed away last winter. Now I only have the company of the radio and memories." Henry felt a lump in his throat. It was like looking at a mirror of what he could have become if he hadn't found Eleanor's letter. "Do you like sweets?" he asked, remembering Eleanor's passion for desserts. Dorothy's face lit up. "I love pudding. My mother used to make a wonderful milk pudding when we were children, but I haven't had a real one in years." "I never learned to make pudding," confessed Henry. "My wife was the one who cooked at home." "I can teach you," offered Dorothy, with an enthusiasm that momentarily rejuvenated her. "In exchange for a good conversation. That's what I miss most these days." And so a new friendship was born. Henry began to visit Dorothy regularly, bringing ingredients for her to teach him old recipes. The pudding he learned became a symbol of their shared afternoons, a tradition he promised himself to maintain in future Christmas dinners. A week later, during a morning walk, Henry spotted a homeless man who was sharing a thin blanket with 2 mutts. The lost look of that stranger haunted him for days, until he decided to return to the location. He found him in the same place, now trying to protect the animals from the light rain that was falling. "Good morning," said Henry, approaching carefully. "May I offer you some coffee?" The man, approximately 50 years old, with an unshaven beard and worn clothes, looked at him with initial suspicion that soon transformed into silent gratitude. His name was Anthony, and he had been living on the streets for 3 years. "I was a construction worker," he told while they had coffee at a nearby bakery. "After an accident that damaged my spine, I lost my job, couldn't get disability benefits, and, without money to pay rent, ended up here. These dogs," he pointed to the 2 mutts that waited patiently outside, "showed up one day and never left me. They're my family now." Without hesitation, Henry offered Anthony a shower, food, and a place to sleep in his house. More than that, he offered something the man hadn't received in years: genuine listening and respect. Upon learning that Anthony had been a skilled worker and lost everything after the accident, Henry felt even more committed to helping. In the following days, he provided new clothes, took him to the doctor, and began to organize his lost documents. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Thompson," said Anthony with a choked voice after taking his first hot shower in months. "Nobody ever—" "You don't need to thank me," Henry gently interrupted. "I'm doing this as much for you as for myself." The spacious backyard of the house became the new home for Anthony's 2 dogs, which were named Popcorn and Brave. Henry, who had never had pets because of Eleanor's allergies, was surprised by the joy the animals brought to the house. Every morning, he woke up to Popcorn's excited barking asking for food. The presence of Anthony, Josephine, Luke, and the regular visits to Dorothy completely transformed Henry's routine. The once silent house gained voices, footsteps, laughter. The photographs of Eleanor and his children remained on the walls, but now shared space with colorful drawings made by Luke and a recent portrait of everyone together, taken on Henry's birthday. To better organize the actions that were beginning to take shape, Henry sought help. That's how he met Carmen, a recently unemployed pharmacy attendant, and her two teenage daughters, Julia and Bianca. He hired them to help him assemble Christmas baskets and distribute them to vulnerable families, identified with the help of Josephine and Anthony. "I want to pay a fair salary," explained Henry to Carmen, who was moved by the proposal. "It's not charity. It's dignified work, with flexible hours so you can continue looking for another job and taking care of the girls." The news about what was happening at Henry's house soon spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors who previously barely greeted him began to appear with donations: food, clothes, furniture in good condition, toys. A retired teacher offered to give reinforcement classes to Luke and other children. A dentist from the building next door provided one day a month for free consultations. The house transformed into a small, informal community center. On Wednesday and Friday mornings, Dorothy taught economical recipes to single mothers. On Monday and Thursday afternoons, Henry organized a small library with donated books, where neighborhood children could do homework with the help of volunteers. On Saturdays, Anthony, who had begun to recover his health and self-esteem, offered small household repairs for the elderly and low-income families. "You're an angel, Mr. Thompson," commented a lady after receiving a basket with food. "God bless you." Henry smiled, embarrassed. "I'm not an angel, Mrs. Davis. I'm just someone who discovered that loneliness hurts less when we share what we have." The unusual movement in a residential area, however, bothered a resident of the street, Roger Albright, a real estate broker known for his difficult temperament. Alleging devaluation of the region's properties and improper use of residential space, he reported Henry's house to the city hall. On a rainy morning in December, a municipal inspector appeared with notifications and a list of bureaucratic requirements to regularize the activities. For a few days, everything had to be suspended. Henry, devastated, gathered Carmen, Anthony, and Josephine in the living room. "Maybe it's time to stop," he said with sadness. "I don't want to create problems for you or for the neighborhood." "You can't give up now," protested Josephine, with Luke clinging to her leg. "Do you know how many families depend on this place?" "Mr. Thompson," intervened Anthony, nervously scratching the beard he now kept trimmed. "Before I met you, I had given up on life. You gave me back my dignity. We can't let a bureaucrat ruin this." The fear of losing everything he had built in the last few months paralyzed Henry for a few days. He seriously thought about giving up, but then messages of support began to arrive, notes left at the gate, phone calls, even unknown people who had discovered his story through posts made by neighbors on social media. One of them was Marina Fields, a volunteer lawyer at a human rights NGO. She knocked on his door one afternoon, offering help to regularize the space. "What you're doing here is extraordinary, Mr. Thompson," she explained while examining the house documents. "We can transform this into a legally constituted community association with all the necessary licenses." With Marina's help, Henry navigated the bureaucracy, registered a non-profit association, and obtained the necessary authorizations. When the inspector returned, he was received with all the documentation in order and an invitation to learn about the work being done. The exposure on social media attracted the attention of a local TV channel, which aired a touching report about the project. On networks, Henry began to be affectionately called the neighborhood grandpa. The repercussion brought not only more support and donations, but also family conflicts that Henry didn't expect. On a Sunday afternoon, Paul, the oldest son whom he hadn't seen in almost 2 years, appeared at the house without warning. He was visibly shocked to find Josephine in the kitchen preparing lunch, Luke playing with the dogs in the backyard, and several volunteers organizing donations in the living room. "What kind of circus is this, Dad?" he asked with evident irritation. "I saw your face on TV yesterday. What's gotten into your head?" Henry invited his son for a private conversation in the old office. Paul, an executive at a multinational corporation, was alarmed by his father's sudden fame and the transformation of the family house into a shelter for strangers. as he described it. They're not strangers, Paul. They're friends. Family I've chosen. Family. Dad, you're being naive. These opportunists just want your money, your house. The discussion escalated quickly. Paul believed his father had gone crazy or was being the victim of an elaborate scam. He threatened to call the police, tried to convince him to stop, and even mentioned the possibility of legally interdicting him, claiming that Henry was not in a condition to manage his assets. Henry listened to everything in silence, with a deep sadness in his eyes. When his son finally fell silent, he responded with surprising firmness. I've never been more lucid, Paul. I understand your concern, but this is my choice. When your mother passed away, I almost lost the meaning of life. These people gave me back the desire to wake up every morning. But Dad, what about our inheritance? The house that Mom loved so much. Henry smiled with melancholy. The greatest inheritance your mother left wasn't material possessions, son. It was the ability to love and care for others. That's what I'm doing now. Paul left irritated, promising to return with lawyers. Henry knew his son would eventually understand. He just needed time. 2 days later, he received an unexpected message from Mary, his daughter who lived in England. She had seen the report shared by a Brazilian friend and wrote a long electronic letter, emotional. Dad, I need to ask for forgiveness. I distanced myself since Mom's passing because the pain was so great that I didn't know how to deal with it. Seeing you moving forward, not just surviving but transforming lives, this made me realize how much time I've lost. I'm proud of the man you've always been and continue to be. If you'll allow me, I'd like to help even from a distance. His daughter's message deeply touched Henry's heart. He immediately responded, opening his heart about the loneliness he had felt, the despair that had almost consumed him, and the redemption he found by following Eleanor's last advice. Robert, the youngest son, was the next to appear. Unlike his brother, he arrived without judgments, curious to understand what was happening. Henry took him to see every corner of the house, introduced him to everyone, and explained in detail how the project worked. I've always wanted to do something like this, confessed Robert, as he helped pack basic food baskets, but I never had the courage to leave my stable job to take the risk. Robert worked with corporate events and was visibly unhappy. Seeing the sparkle in his father's eyes as he explained future plans, something awakened in him. In the following days, he began to appear regularly to help. 2 weeks later, he announced his decision. He had resigned and wanted to dedicate himself fully to organizing the actions, better structuring the operation of the place. In Christmas week, exactly 1 year after that lonely night that had changed everything, an unexpected proposal came through the hands of the same inspector who had previously threatened to shut down the project. The City Hall offered to officialize Henry's house as a permanent community support point, with rights to public resources, paid staff, and expansion of services. Henry received the official document with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Sitting on the porch with popcorn and Brave at his feet, he contemplated the printed sheets with the City Hall's coat of arms. Something wrong, Dad? Asked Robert, who now lived in a small apartment nearby and spent most of his time at the house coordinating activities. I don't know if it's the right path, confessed Henry. I fear that bureaucracy will stiffen affection, that rules will erase the human warmth we've built here. Robert sat beside his father, understanding his hesitation. I understand your fear, but think about the reach we could have with more resources. How many Josephines and Anthonys still need help? Henry nodded, thoughtful. For an entire week, he met with everyone involved in the project to discuss the proposal. He listened to opinions, fears, suggestions. Marina, the lawyer, thoroughly analyzed the contract, ensuring that the group's autonomy would be preserved. After deep reflection, Henry understood that with balance he could reach more people without losing the essence of the work. We'll accept, he finally announced, but with our conditions. This place was born from affection and will continue so, regardless of official stamps. The news of the partnership with the City Hall spread quickly. Local newspapers made new articles, interviewing the benefited families. A radio station invited Henry for a weekly program about community solidarity. With each new exposure, more people approached wanting to help or be helped. The afternoon of December 24th arrived with a special energy in the air. The backyard of the house was decorated with colored lights, tables arranged in a U-shape to accommodate all the guests. Volunteers ran from one side to the other, finalizing preparations for the community dinner that would gather more than 50 people. In the kitchen, Dorothy supervised the preparation of sweets, including her famous pudding that everyone now loved. Anthony, wearing a new shirt bought especially for the occasion, organized the chairs with the help of two other men who, like him, had found a new beginning through the project. Luke, who had visibly grown throughout that year, ran through the backyard with other children, all wearing Santa hats. The boy now attended a better school, thanks to a scholarship obtained by Robert, and his math grades continued to be impressive. Josephine, with her 9-month belly, rested in an armchair in the living room, receiving constant care from Carmen and her daughters. The doctor had predicted the birth for the first week of January, but everyone joked that the baby might decide to be born on Christmas night, as a symbol of the rebirth they all were experiencing. Paul, still reluctant, but already less hostile, arrived at the beginning of the night with his wife and 2 teenage children. He brought an envelope with an anonymous donation from his company, and more importantly, a sincere hug for his father. "I still don't completely understand, Dad," he admitted, "but I respect what you've built here." "You don't need to understand everything now, son," responded Henry, moved by Paul's presence. "You just need to be here." Mary couldn't come from England, but she sent a long video message that was projected on the living room wall, moving everyone. She announced that she was organizing a group of Americans in London to raise funds and help expand the project. As the night progressed, the house became increasingly full. Families welcomed throughout the year, volunteers, neighbors, and elderly people gathered around an abundant and affectionate dinner. Robert had organized a community secret Santa, ensuring that everyone, especially the children, received a gift. It was during the gift exchange that Josephine, sitting next to Henry, felt the first strong contraction. Her face contracted in pain, and she grabbed Henry's hand tightly. "I think it's time," she whispered, with a mixture of fear and excitement. The news spread quickly among the guests. Carmen, who had experience as a nursing assistant, checked Josephine's condition and confirmed that labor had begun. Robert was already calling a taxi to take her to the hospital when the torrential rain began to fall, accompanied by thunder and lightning that illuminated the night sky. "The streets of the hill are impassable with this rain," informed a neighbor who had just arrived. "Landslides have blocked the main access." Panic began to set in. Josephine, now with more frequent contractions, was taken to Henry's bedroom. Carmen tried to calm her while Marina frantically called emergency services. "The ambulance can't get through with this storm," announced Marina, hanging up the phone. "They said only when the rain decreases." It was Dorothy who brought serenity to the chaos. With the authority of her 80 years, she stated, "This child will be born here and all of us will help. In my time, babies were born at home with midwives. Carmen has medical knowledge, I have experience, and the rest of you have hands to help." The bedroom quickly transformed into an improvised delivery room. Boiled water, clean towels, a desperate son being consoled by Henry in the living room. The entire community mobilized, each assuming a function, united by a common purpose, to bring a new life into the world safely and with love. After 2 hours of labor, between screams, tears, and prayers, the sharp cry of a baby echoed through the house, overlapping the sound of the rain that was beginning to diminish. A healthy and strong girl was born in Carmen's hands, assisted by Dorothy, under the emotional gaze of all who crowded at the door. Luke was the first to enter after everything was clean and organized. He approached timidly the bed where his mother rested with the baby in her arms. "Want to meet your sister?" asked Josephine with an exhausted but radiant smile. The boy nodded, marveled at that small being with reddened skin and dark hair. "What will she be called?" Josephine looked at Henry, who observed the scene from the door, with silent tears streaming down his wrinkled face. "I thought of calling her Eleanor Augusta, in honor of 2 people who changed our lives." The birth of little Eleanor in the house itself moved all those present. At Josephine's suggestion, the girl received not only the name, but also Henry's last name as a tribute, not for formality, but for belonging to a family that had formed through affection, not blood. In the following months, the project continued to grow. Elderly people from other neighborhoods sought guidance to replicate the initiative in their communities. What had begun with a solitary gesture became a network with dozens of active nuclei spread throughout the city. Robert, revealing a talent for social management that even he didn't know he had, took over the general coordination of the project. Paul, still working at the multinational, began to dedicate his weekends to financial organization, ensuring transparency and sustainability. Mary from England took care of international communication and fundraising. A group of volunteer communicators created an official page on social media, and recognition spread beyond the neighborhood borders. Public and private entities began to financially support the movement, making it possible to buy a neighboring house to expand the service. Family life also reorganized around the project. The children, once absent, became an active part of their father's new reality. Paul bought an apartment nearby and came to dinner with the family at least once a week. Robert moved definitively to the neighborhood. Mary announced that she would return to the United States next year, bringing in her luggage not only donations but also the desire to reconnect with her roots. Henry's house, once silent and marked by absence, became a home again. Meals were collective, with children running through the corridors, elderly people telling stories from other times, and volunteers crossing paths with hugs and smiles. The dining room table, which one day had housed only memories and empty chairs, now barely accommodated all who wanted a place around it. Luke, now turning 10, showed an exceptional talent for mathematics and dreamed of being an engineer. Eleanor Augusta, almost a year old, was taking her first steps, held by Henry's firm hands, who at 79 felt more alive and stronger than ever. On Christmas night, exactly 1 year after Eleanor's birth and 2 years after that first solitary dinner, dozens of families and volunteers gathered again at the house, now expanded and renovated. In the center of the main table, surrounded by his children, by Josephine and the children, by Anthony, Dorothy, and so many others who had become part of his life, Henry raised a glass in an emotional toast. 2 years ago, I was alone at this table, thinking that my life was over. Today, I look around and see that it was just beginning in a new way. Eleanor taught me in her last letter that happiness is not in the absence of pain, but in sharing the journey. Silent tears streamed down his face as he continued. I discovered that the greatest inheritance we can leave is not made of material goods, but of bonds. Bonds that once created multiply and transform lives, as happened with all of us here. Henry's words were received with emotional applause. Luke, sitting beside him, held his hand with affection. Thank you for being our grandpa, Mr. Thompson, said the boy with simplicity. In Josephine's lap, little Eleanor Augusta babbled her first words, oblivious to the importance of the moment, but already an integral part of that current of affection that had transformed so many lives. Henry looked at Eleanor's portrait on the wall, now accompanied by dozens of other photographs that told the story of those 2 extraordinary years. In the silence of his heart, he thanked his companion for her last and most precious gift, the chance to rediscover the purpose of life through love for others. And so, on a Christmas night that had begun in solitude and culminated in a family expanded by affection and solidarity, Henry understood that the true miracle wasn't just in helping others, but in allowing himself to be helped by them. In a perfect circle of giving and receiving, he had found not only a new beginning, but also the most beautiful continuation of the love story he had lived with Eleanor. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Henry and his Hart family has deeply touched your emotions. To continue this journey of soul-warming stories, we've prepared a special playlist with equally moving narratives. Find it here, clicking to the left of the screen. If this story awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to this video. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life. Share in the comments if you have experienced or witnessed an emotional rebirth like Henry's. We're eager to read your experiences and connect hearts through these stories of overcoming and love.